Hello, everyone, and welcome. If anyone's ever taken any of my Secure Set online Python videos or something, I have a reputation for saying that a lot every time I start a new video, like, hello and welcome. So anyway, my name is Serge Borso, and I'm here to talk about snitching in the real world. Well, the real cybersecurity world anyway. And the premise of this is really going to be my own experience of hosting less than reputable websites and how and why they get taken down. And as a takeaway, it's not just me telling stories. It's, maybe some of you are dealing with the same situations, or you're going to host your own C2 servers or beef hooks or phishing domains or whatever. And this may be relevant for you. And hopefully I can impart some knowledge and walk away with teaching some useful information. All right, so here's me. I can actually Google myself now, and I got a little blurb over there on the right-hand side that comes up. So I figured I'd switch over to this type of descriptor of myself. I've got a fair amount of history, about 15 years or so in the world of cybersecurity. Back in my day, it was called information security, and cybersecurity was something we kind of laughed at when we heard it come out, but it seems to become much more prevalent terminology nowadays. Regardless, once again, my name is Serge Borso. I'm the founder and CEO of SpiderSec, and I teach with the SANS Institute. And I published a book last year, I think it was, The Penetration Tester's Guide to Web Applications. And I've been doing what I do, like I said, for 15 years for large businesses, big enterprises, application security, network security, system security, penetration testing, red teaming, purple teaming, so on and so forth, all of it. And that's what my company does nowadays. I did it for 10, 11, 12 years for the industry, and now I do it for myself. That is penetration testing and offering those same type of services I just mentioned for companies through my company. So that's a little bit about me. And what I experienced working for companies and doing what I do nowadays is, among other things, phishing and command and control and beef hooks and other things that require a third-party virtually hosted platform somewhere in the cloud, quote unquote, that can host this maliciousness. And of course, it's not malicious. If you're doing something like a security awareness training campaign or a spear phishing attack, and you're doing this for the purpose of increasing the security posture of the business you're working for, or you're doing this as some type of contract work or consulting work for a company, they've hired you to assess their security, you're going to have a C2 server. If you're doing with any type of callback communications, or you're going to have some spear phishing websites that you've registered, you try to do some credential harvesting or delivery of a payload, it requires some external presence out there. So as you're going through this talk, and kind of that's the premise for this, where you're going to be hosting stuff, and maybe you already are, and I certainly have. And that's the background for this. Phishing is prevalent. There's a little maybe citation needed for that. I haven't quantified that, but I think we can all agree that phishing is rather prevalent, and I'll be speaking to kind of that. I won't bring in too much more C2 conversation or beef hook because it's almost irrelevant. The point here is that there is something that you're hosting on a website that, to the untrained user or the layperson, they're going to look at that and say, oh, that's malicious, or that's suspicious, or that's not normal. That's not a regular website. You're doing something bad, or you're doing something whatever. And it's going to get taken down. So the background is, like I said, phishing. The company gets hit with a real spear phishing campaign. They want to get some awareness training because the people at their company clicked on that link, and now there's a malware outbreak or something bad happened. Me, I've hosted a lot of websites. I've registered a lot of phishing domains. I'm under 100, but more than 50 in my lifetime, I guess. And when I do this, I'm doing an awareness training program for a large client. I register a domain. I go and copy the theme from a real website like Dropbox.com and all the different elements, and I get an SSL certificate to make it look real. And I go about doing my job, and then I launch my phishing campaign the day of the campaign when it's supposed to be sent out for the client, and all of a sudden my website gets taken down, or it gets taken down before I even send out the phishing campaign. And this has happened to me more than once over the years, multiple times, and it's annoying. It's money, it's time, it's effort, And if I'm too stupid to back up my stuff, I've lost a lot of time and money, well, mostly time, but time is money. The point here is that my stuff gets taken down and I want to know what the heck is going on. So I started doing some research into this 2017, 2018, 2019, not consistent, like I'm spending 40 hours a week doing research, but every time I was going to host a phishing website, I started paying closer attention to what was actually going on. And I wanted to find out who's the snitch, who's narking me out, who or whom is the entity or entities that is or are causing my websites to be taken offline. That's the premise for this. That's what I'm trying to talk about. And that's what I'm going to share with you, because I have found the smoking gun. And at the end of the presentation, I'll share that information with you, but we'll get there piece by piece. So you can read that for yourself. I'm not going to read the slides for the most part, but I will kind of use those to kind of guide this conversation. But that was really the premise, trying to do my job to help companies increase their security posture by sending out security awareness training and phishing and spear phishing campaigns, and then those websites being taken offline. Okay, and I want to find out what's going on. So we can look at this, and the question, of course, is what is it? And those of you looking at the screen will easily say, well, obviously that's Dropbox.com. Well, yeah, it certainly looks like it, right? The theme, the colors, the font, the size of those input boxes, that's clearly Dropbox.com. Just like this is clearly Amazon.com. There's even a copyright at the bottom. What else could it possibly be? That's definitely the legitimate, real Amazon.com. And those of us who have Apple accounts, that's definitely Apple's website, right? Well, no, those are all phishing websites. So what? So they're phishing websites. Who cares? Well, let's think about it. At what point does a legitimate website that you or I go register turn from just a website into something that's more malicious? And that's why I got the little caterpillar turning into a butterfly up there. It's a transformation. What happens? What makes it just a legitimate server that's listening on port 80 or port 443 to the ultimate takedown request that says, someone says, hey, this is malicious, or this is suspicious, or I don't trust this? What really happens from point A to point B that causes something like that to occur? That's a fair question. That's what we're going to talk about. So Google, your registrar, your internet service provider, your hosting provider, if you have a VPS, if you have AWS or something in the cloud, what's going to cause them to take action to say, I'm going to suspend your service or disable your account? Or what's happened to me, I'm going to suspend your service, and by the way, you just forfeited all of your credit that you had prepaid for the next 6 months. Told you I lost time and money. I'm not joking. Let's back up for a second though. Level set. So what am I talking about here? There's a process that goes into play, and I am by no means trying to point out these companies on the slide as good or bad or whatever. I'm just giving you some examples of who you may go to for your own hosting needs, for your own registration needs. So you, me, anyone on this call or listening to this presentation can easily go and buy or lease a domain name. If you have a credit card, all you really have to do is just say, I want this domain. And if it's available and you can afford it, you click a couple buttons, and that's pretty much it. The registrar gladly accepts your money, and that's the first point. Meaning, if I am Google or I am some authority of the web who's going to have the potential to launch an abuse notification or a takedown request, this is the first kind of point where what you've just created could be scrutinized. Because before this, there's nothing out there. You don't have a website. You still don't have a website. But now you've gone from zero to you have something. You have a domain name. If it's called evilwebsite.com, is that enough for someone to complain about it? Maybe, but that's not gonna hold water when someone tries to take it down. So that's point one though. So if you go to register evilwebsite.com, yeah, okay, not a big deal, probably in most cases. If you go to register evildropbox.com, Well, that's a little bit closer. Now you're using the name of a legitimate company in your domain name, and guess what? Dropbox does pay attention to that. There is typo squatting, and even though it's not a typo squat, it's still similar enough to where you're using a legitimate company's name in your own domain name, and that's going to raise suspicion one level above nothing. So keep that in mind. The next point number 2, a domain by itself is just sitting there. Just because you register a domain doesn't mean you have a website running on there. It could be parked, but it certainly isn't your source code or anything. It has to do with anything you've done other than register a website. So this next point is you change DNS, and you point the DNS for the A name for your domain to an IP address that can actually host content for you. And of course, you could keep it with the default DNS and IP address and just use the hosting provider that you register the domain name with. But regardless, it's the second point. Once you actually have DNS pointing somewhere and you're hosting content somewhere, now we're talking about I go to your website, it resolves DNS, it points me to a website, and my browser renders that page. Now that's the second point. That's potentially another avenue where a company or someone who wants to take down your website could say, hey, this looks suspicious. This evil dropbox.com, now there's a domain name, and now it takes me to a website. Point number 2. Point number 3, when I'm creating any type of spear phishing website, or even basic security awareness training websites or C2 servers, anything that I'm hosting nowadays, I'm going to get an SSL certificate for if there's any type of communication that is web-based or needs to be encrypted in transit, and because it's free and it takes very, very limited amounts of effort. Although it takes a little bit more effort than it did a couple months ago. I'm not going to get into that, but let's just go ahead and say SSL certs are free. There's Let's Encrypt and others like Let's Encrypt, to where it almost doesn't make sense to not do this. When you're trying to launch a phishing campaign, you want to make it look as legitimate as possible. And users for years have been trained to look for the HTTPS. So that's point number 3, register an SSL certificate. And we'll get more into why these points matter in just a moment. The next thing, you have a website, you have DNS, you have a domain name, SSL cert, and now you got to start copying over stuff. Perhaps the real theme, the real logo, the real fonts, the real colors, all from the websites you're trying to rip off, or not rip off, but you know what I'm saying. Like, you're going to copy that theme. I can go straight to Dropbox.com right now using Firefox and say file save as, and all that client-side content gets saved to my machine. And I can upload it and tweak it a little bit, but essentially upload that to my phishing website, and I've got a pretty good copy right off the bat of the real Dropbox.com. I'm not picking out Dropbox for any other reason other than they're on my mind right now. Okay, nothing else special about that. The last point here is just to reiterate, we've registered domain, we've changed DNS, we're hosting our site somewhere, we have an SSL certificate, we have a functional website. And now we send out our actual phishing email to our recipients. At any one of these 5 points I've outlined right here, those are specific areas where some company or some human or some technology could intervene and say, this looks suspicious. Of course, there's more to it. There's a lot more to it, but don't have time to go into every single little thing as far as bots and keys and firewalls and protection and stuff like that. But essentially, it's not too crazy to do all the stuff I just said. That takes an hour or so to do that. Now the question becomes, at what point during these 5 points I've outlined, do you think that a website could get flagged as suspicious? And feel free to, I'm looking at Discord right now, and I'm happy to, entertain any guesses you might have. Once you buy a domain, is someone gonna complain about that? Once you change DNS to get the certificate, once you borrow all the themes from the real website, or once you send out the phishing mail, at what point are you most likely to get a takedown request or an abuse notification, or your registrar is going to say, sorry, your account has been served, your account's been suspended? Feel free to think about it. I guess it's more of a rhetorical question, but just to reiterate, I am keeping an eye on the Discord channel, and I'm happy to interact there as well. So just to level set kind of what I'm talking about, that's the big red thing you see right there. That's within, I believe, Google Chrome. We'll show you something that looks pretty much like that. I've obfuscated some of the content here just because, like I said, I did this is a kind of the culmination of research I've done over the years, but this research is based off of me registering real websites for real customers that really have NDAs in place. So I don't want to necessarily show everything, but that Dropbox.com, with the first part being obfuscated, is basically like your company name .dropbox.com or whatever the case may be. And that's what we see when Google and their safe browsing project learn about your website and they come to the conclusion that it's suspect or suspicious or a quote unquote web forgery or is malicious or whatever. This is what someone sees. Do you have any idea how big of an impact this plays when you're trying to launch a spear phishing campaign to harvest credentials or to get a foothold into an environment during a red team engagement? It's a big deal. I downplayed it by saying it takes like an hour to set all this up. But, I also left out a lot of complexity there. There's a lot of troubleshooting and testing and making sure that theme looks exactly perfect and figuring out what you do with the credentials once you steal them properly, so on and so forth. So it's a big deal. If you go to launch your phishing campaign and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I can't even get to my website anymore. And my victims aren't going to be able to either. That's a big deal. It's a pretty big blow to your whole campaign right there. Okay. And there's a couple other things here. I got AmazonShipping.io, TrainingMachine.net, FacebookUpdate.com, UpdatingServer.com. Those are more generic ones that I've used over the years, or at least a year, I guess, for what we're talking about, phishing campaigns, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the middle, we're seeing a customer notification that's, below this email is a phishing report we have received about your service. We expect you to resolve this within 24 hours or your service will be suspended. Gee, thanks. Thanks a lot. Where's the faith in humanity? I'm doing this for educational purposes, not for legitimate harm to people. Right. At any rate, this is based on research, and I'm here to basically tell you what I learned. So let's kind of take this for what it is. What entities are going to flag the website? Because I said, this Google Safe Browsing project and companies like Dropbox keep pretty close tabs sometimes on similar domains. Same concept here. We'll start with the first. I've highlighted it in this pinkish, purplish color. Your registrar, number one. They're not really going to stop you. The registrars of the world don't necessarily care about the name of the domain that you choose to register. There's, in this country, we got free speech and you can buy whatever the heck you want. That's perfectly fine. Even if it's called thisisafishingwebsite.com. So what? They're not going to be the ones that are going to narc you out. Let's encrypt the SSL certificate, the certificate provider of choice for many of us who are just setting up websites like this. Not paying too close of attention to the certificates it issues. Meaning if they see a request for thisisafishingwebsite.com, so what? Once again, freedom of speech, freedom of, let's encrypt SSL everywhere type of thing. And that would kind of go against some core beliefs to just not allow a certificate based on the name of the domain being suspicious or weird or something like that. So once again, not a big issue there based on my experience. Robots, this is real. There are bots that are scouring the web on a day, hour, minute basis looking for copyright and trademark infringements. That's real. And when I'm copying FedEx or UPS or Amazon shipping stuff and I register domain with their name inside of it, that raises some suspicion. And when their robot goes to that website and they see that there's actually some logos and themes from the legitimate website, I've gotten dozens and dozens of emails from those type of companies saying to take down the content. Otherwise, they're going to do something legal against me. So keep that in mind. People, humans that come across your website will definitely say, this is weird, this is suspect, and they will potentially go there just using a couple of clicks in the browser and report it to Google, report it using Firefox or whatever browser they happen to use, and say this. I think this is a, like I said before, a quote unquote suspected web forgery, whatever that means, a suspicious website basically. So people, now we're kind of getting a little bit farther up the chain here. Humans definitely do have an impact on this, and there actually are other humans that will look at some of those abuse requests and notices and take some action if it so warrants it. Next one, kind of already touched on this, that company A, the robots scour the web, and that company is actually going to go and see if you're using their logos and stuff, and then they're going to maybe report you or at least send some email to the abuse contact for the whois information. Now, other stuff that's going to come into play, the endpoint solutions and the other company here. So if you register a domain, because you're going to do the stuff we're talking about, phishing or beef hooks, or you need to host something third party and you need to have a domain name associated with it, you go to head register that, and then you send out some phishing email to your victim. That email goes through usually several layers of filtering. There's some email filtering, some spam filtering, maybe even endpoint detection, perhaps, but at least some type of some email gateway that's going to scrutinize that. And nowadays, because it is 2020, phishing isn't new by any stretch of the imagination. People in companies and a lot of us have gotten kind of a little bit smarter and to say, well, here's a link in this email, and I'm going to do a simple whois lookup on this and see when it's been registered. And if you registered it, like I said, a week ago, that email scrubbing solution or the filter, the gateway, as the case may be, can easily ascertain that and then mark that as a suspicious email, send it to spam, or simply quarantine it. It doesn't even come to you, or something quasi like that. They'll just make it so that link isn't even clickable. So definitely suspect if it's a very brand new website and all of a sudden there's a link in an email pointing to that brand new website. Next one, no reputation, meaning you have a website, you registered it maybe 6 months ago, but there's a blank page because you're like, oh, I'm getting ready for this engagement, or I'm going to go ahead and register AmazonShipping.io because I'm going to need it at some point. Then it sits there and nothing is there and it has no reputation. Reputation means it's not good, it's not bad, it's not classified, it's not violent, it's not news, it's not a blog, it's not whatever, it's no classification, no reputation. That's suspect. Okay. And then of course, if the certificate has the name of a legitimate company in it, that too is suspect. And that's different than the other stuff we've already talked about. I mentioned Let's Encrypt and I mentioned the company in question. Like if you're trying to duplicate Dropbox.com or Amazon.com or Apple.com, when you actually register that SSL certificate through Let's Encrypt or a similar provider, there is a log of that. And the more mature companies who have to deal with this, at scale, they are looking for those in their certificate transparency logs. If they can easily query and search for something that has anything star.apple.com or starapple.com or some type of fuzzy query to see if there's any apple.com websites being registered, like loginapple.com. And that's interesting. Now, what have I come across? To kind of answer some of the stuff I've been laying down here so far, what I've seen is number 5. Once an actual email gets sent out, that has the highest likelihood of being flagged. So the email gateway, that's usually where it happens at. Meaning I can host a website, get the DNS pointed over to a hosting server, copy over all the themes from the legitimate Dropbox or whatever Amazon type of website I'm trying to copy to trick users into divulging credentials or the like. And I'm usually okay. I can host it for a matter of weeks. What I've come across is it's typically number 5. Once you send that phishing email out and it goes through the gateways and they're checking all those things we just talked about, that's where I've had my highest incidence of people, humans, actually reporting the website as suspicious at that point. And that's what I found out. So I'll show you some examples here in just a second, but in general, that was kind of the first half here. So once again, we have a website, we have a need to do some type of security awareness training or phishing as part of a penetration test or red team engagement. So we go ahead and register that website, get it all set up and ready to go, and then send out that email, and it's taken offline, like quick, with the quickness. How do we avoid that? Because depending on what you do for a living and what your role is at the organization or entity you work for, that may be part of your job, and you're supposed to be successful. You know, you're the pen tester. You got to start trying harder, thinking outside the box, and figuring out, well, okay, as soon as I send the email out, my website gets taken down. And the consequences are such that it's not just like, oh, that sucks. It's more of a, where were you hosting it? Was it in AWS? Because now your whole Amazon account could be called into question. And Amazon, you want to go talk to AWS about, no, it's actually a real website. I was just hosting it for phishing, and I'm actually one of the good guys, and I have a job doing security awareness training, and yeah, that's not so great. And what if you have other critical assets linked to that AWS account? It all gets suspended. Okay, VPS, a virtual private server, that hosting company will suspend your whole account. I've had a handful of servers just get taken offline, and they never came back. I briefly alluded to at the beginning of this money I've lost, where I actually paid for several months, 6+ months of service at a virtual private server hosting company, and they got one. Well, it was more than one, but they got wind of one of my phishing campaigns, and they suspended service. And it was right at a really inopportune time, quite frankly, right in the middle of a phishing engagement with a client who's paying money for this. And now I look like an idiot, and I am scrambling to get my stuff back up and running. And I've spent money that now I got a suspended account, and I can refund my money. It's like, this is serious. It's serious on multiple levels. So that's why I'm trying to figure out, well, who's the narc? Who's snitching on me for this? Because that's not cool. All right, so what do we do about it? The first one, test offline, use a firewall. What do I mean by this? I mean, once you get the domain name and you register it, you do SSL certificates, and you're hosting it somewhere, leave the firewall turned on. Whitelist or have an allow list for your IP address that you're testing from. And that way you can see it, but any robots that goes there, no connection. No TCP connection, no website, it's nothing at all. It's like it's offline. For anyone else who tries to go to that website while you're in beta testing, no one else can see it. So just firewall it off completely. What else? Second bullet point, don't point the website resources to the legitimate website. Host it locally. What do I mean by that? Let me break that down. When you go to utilize the theme and the elements from a legitimate website, what I mean is the CSS files, the JavaScript files, the images, the fonts, all that stuff. Those are the resources that comprise any website you go to right now. When you're copying those from a legitimate website, there's two different ways to go about doing this. You can just say, when someone loads the page, that image is located at www.dropbox.com/images/logo.png. That's hosted on Dropbox.com, meaning when someone goes to your phishing website, or even you, when you're just beta testing it, that image loads from a request that got sent to Dropbox.com, which directly touches Dropbox.com's servers. Hopefully that makes sense. So hosting locally means you copy all those images once. You go to the website, you get the images, you get the CSS files, you get whatever it may be. And then from there, we're talking about you have it locally on your server. Okay, I see a couple of people typing in the Discord channel. Is it using hash analysis of the images and trying to search in the CSS? No. Oh, I think he said, I think he got it. Right. So don't point, but can they pick up if you clone the images? Absolutely, they can. So the question is, we copy those files locally to our own VPS at that point, and could Dropbox.com then go and say, hey, based on this image, you've obviously just cloned it, you copied it? Yeah, definitely, but there's no indicator at this point in time. If you're hosting everything locally and some VPS you just spun up, some virtual private server that you just turned on, now we're talking about they have no indicator to know to go to your VPS. And if you're still in the demo beta phase of this, you have it firewalled off anyway. Firewalled off meaning no one can even go to that website to see it. So that's what I'm talking about there. Rackfire45 is typing something. We'll see what that individual has to say in just a moment, and I'll address that question or comment. Thanks, Doug. Good call on that. All right, next one. Wait until final moment before they go live to register the certificate. What does that mean? And I got a little asterisk there. It can be negative for reputation. Going back to reputation, I mentioned if you had the reputation, if you're specifically your website has a reputation, it hasn't made it to being indexed as trusted, or is this a blog site, or B9, I guess essentially is what it would come down to. Without you registering a certificate and having it online and ready to go, you're missing out on the reputation. Meaning if I go register AmazonShipping.io, which you guys saw a few slides back, and that's been up for 6 months or a year. You guys need to who is look up on there right now and tell me how long it's been up. It's been up for a while, and the reputation on that should be okay because I haven't really hosted anything on there in a while. So the point here is waiting till the last minute can have some negative consequences as well, because you don't build up that trust within the whole system. So Rackfire says this is good information. I'm sorry to hear you lost time and money. Yeah, no problem. That's probably what keeping me from going further into the security field. Yeah, I hear you on that. PM scientist. I got to be careful how I pronounce some of these names. Question: what pros cons exist for using a site you manage as a reverse proxy to man in the middle of a simulated site versus copying the right bits of the simulated site? So what pros and cons exist? I got to think about that. Happens in anything. If something I worry about constantly. Something I worry about constantly, yeah. PM scientist, I'll come back to that unless I forget. In which case I will come back to that for sure. I got to think about that for a second. All right, other stuff here. Understand in black bold points right there. You got to figure out what your points of exposure are. I highlighted the 5 main ones, but there's other stuff out there. The maturity level of the company you're trying to basically trick people into going to, like, it's not really Amazon.com. It's not really Dropbox.com. It's fake Dropbox.com. If those companies are on their game, so to speak, and they're doing things like typo scouting checks, and they have their standard policy framework set up properly, so you can't just spoof an email, and other stuff you see here on the screen, certificate transparency logs, for instance, most companies don't do that. I got some around asterisks. That's like only some companies are really seriously doing this stuff. This takes some automation. This takes some humans setting it up. This takes some humans actually putting the effort into watching what's going on. And as far as typo squatting goes, just to be clear, you can't stop someone from registering AmazonShipping.io or Amazon.photography or Amazon.ninja or Amazon. You can't stop people from doing that. It's a free country, okay? Amazon can't stop people from doing that. They can try and they can complain about it, but in most cases, it's just something you don't have control over. So there's always going to be that subset of people who are going to click on that link anyway, even though it's on Amazon.com, it's Amazon.ninja or something like that. But there are other areas of exposure highlighted in this slide right here that you need to be aware of that could potentially get you exposed before your time is up. All right. Hosting platform. What do you have to think about here? This is real. This is copy and pasted straight from my hosting provider. And as far as going back to the main theme and question of this whole talk, who's the narc? Who's snitching on me? You can see right there in yellow. And I got nothing negative or positive to say. This is just reality. This is research. And this is me giving it to you in black and white. Okay? This is something that happened to me back in October 2019. Dropbox abuse detected on your infrastructure, which is why I was kind of harping on Dropbox as Dropbox.com as an example, because I got hit with it. I copied all their stuff, just like you saw in the previous slides. I hosted it. I did all the stuff I talked about. And go to launch the phishing website email campaign, then boom, hosting providers like, hey, we got 9 complaints passed from upstream providers about phishing. So yeah, there's companies out there that do this. There's companies out there that get paid to do this, to protect their customers. And it's kind of ironic. I'm getting paid to protect that same company. And these people are getting paid to protect them in a different way, to watch out. So, you know, there's value in this one way or the other. Yeah, I got burned on it, but arguably they were doing their job. Not arguably, they were doing their job. And it just happened to impact me doing my job. There's no gray area about that. It's not bad. It's not good. It just is what it is. But there you go. So the snitch people, I'll give you a heads up on this. The second bullet point there, overzealous IT administrators, back to Rackfire 45. Yeah, it's good information. You can get burned, man. One of the first times I was doing this, I remember it was similar to all the stuff I said, you know, register domain, get the SSL certificate set up, send out the spear phishing campaign. It looks beautiful, looks great. And one of the IT admins at the company that received the phishing email actually went to the whois, did like a simple whois search on the command line. It's very easy to do. Found the abuse contact email, sent out an abuse notification to that point of contact at the registrar, or I think the hosting platform, and got my website taken offline in the middle, once again, in the middle of the phishing campaign. So there's some other pieces that go into this. Communication with the company you're working for. Yeah, Poop Squad 420, that is an ouch, without a doubt. It got taken. I actually asked the person, my point of contact at that customer, to, hey, this is what just happened. Can you have your IT admin, kind of correct the situation, because we got some issues doing this campaign right now. It's like they're paying me to do this, and their own person kind of took it offline. But it is what it is. That's just reality of it, I use a script the abuse contact when I was responsible for incoming email. Yeah, Technic. Yep. Technology, that goes back to what we saw kind of in the last slide, people plus technology. Technology does a pretty good job nowadays, quite frankly, of picking up on this, just based on the factual information. How long has the website been around for? And the other easy to identify things that you could automate. Like, is there any type of, known history of this website as a hosted malware in the past? Is it, so on and so forth. All right, so Rackfire 45 says, I'm surprised you couldn't fight it after the fact to at least recover your funding costs. Time Machine would have helped recover lost time. Yeah, I can't complain too much about it. It's almost like the 2 Coalfire guys who got arrested for doing their job. Yeah, it sucked, but when it was happening around that moment in time, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's not cool at this moment in time, but I'm sure they're gonna have a really cool DEF CON talk or Black Hat talk, and of course they did. So same thing here. I'm talking about it. I'm sharing my knowledge, and while I lost some time and a little bit of money, the reality is I got my knowledge I can share with each of you, and hopefully it's useful for you. All right, difference between malware and phishing. There's not a huge difference here. Okay, there's, from the perspective of, just like the slide says, from this perspective of this behavior violates our terms of service, so on and so forth, it's not really much of a difference as far as your hosting provider is concerned, or your platform, or your registrar. If you're violating terms of service, whether it's a C2 server, whether it's a beef hook, the browser exploitation framework, or whether it's a spear phishing website, it's the same concept there. Phishing, though, definitely some copyright issues to take into account, meaning if I'm hosting a C2 server, I'm not copying the theme from Dropbox.com. It's irrelevant. I'm not doing that. So there's some variance, nuance there, without a doubt. And of course, phishing is definitely much better understood. I say C2, command and control. I'm sorry if anyone here didn't immediately know what that was, but not everyone does. C2 means command and control. And that's not quite as obvious and prevalent for people not in the know. Phishing, everyone knows what phishing is, most everyone in this industry, but C2, well, maybe not everyone understands that. So the point here is, when it's more obvious to the layperson, it's more likely to potentially get taken down. So the other thing here, providers might work with you if they think your website was compromised. That's a reality, meaning oh, it wasn't me doing this on purpose. My website was compromised, and that's why there's phishing. Yeah, right. I'm not advocating saying that at all. I always tell the truth. My providers, I say, hey, here's my name, here's my company, SpiderSec, and you can just go to the website right now and read what we do. You know, this isn't new. We've been in business for 5 years, and this is who we're dealing with. So anyway, other things you can do, the difference here, maybe a non-standard port could help you out. So other things to think about before I go back to PM Scientist's question and any other questions that pop up here in Discord are really going to be firewall. Firewall stuff off. There's no need to tell the world about your phishing website or your command and control server before the world needs to know about it. Quite frankly, you could host this on your local Linux box or your Windows machine as your preference may be, and then just go live at the last minute with the actual content. The reputation helps a lot. Bullet point, that means get the domain name, get the certificate, host something benign on there, like a legitimate blog or a legitimate photography gallery or whatever. And it just sits there, it gets some traffic, and it gets reputation which isn't negative. And then when you're ready to pull the trigger, that's when you upload the more malicious component to it. And the other thing here, yeah, flip a record, MX last minute, absolutely. Per Doug Brush, just switch over DNS, point somewhere else, and you're good to go. That's even smarter. Other smart things you can do, redirect. If your target organization that you work for or you're working with, if you know if it's like a single location, which is probably not nowadays, everyone's working from home, but if people were all in the office coming from one netted IP address, and you know what that IP address is because you work there, and you're doing this in-house as an internal security awareness training, pen tester, whatever your title may be, then you already know what the IP address is. And you can just redirect when you see that IP address on your Apache web server or some other upstream device. You can say, if I see this IP address, then show this page. You can do that in PHP or your .NET or Java, as the case may be as well. Same thing for C2 traffic. If you know what to look for, then you can just show the visitor what you want them to see. So a regular visitor who goes and stumbles across your phishing domain just sees the regular blog, whereas someone who you're targeting actually sees the phishing website. Always have some backup plans in place. And then bulletproof, kind of last thought there with bulletproof hosting providers. I took a serious look at them after this happened, like the second or third time. Yes, very sneaky indeed. The bulletproof hosting providers, though, they didn't seem to be viable. They were quite expensive, like hundreds of dollars a month for hosting, and it's difficult to justify that price point. Number one. Number two, looking at the second bullet point on the slide deck again, reputation helps a lot. What do you think the reputation is of a bulletproof hosting provider's IP range? Yeah. Okay. your luck and your kind of mileage may vary with that, but generally speaking, nowadays maybe the IPv6 if you can get one of those, but still you're paying a lot of money for it. And what I mean by bulletproof hosting, just so we're all on the same page, is when a bulletproof hosting provider receives an abuse notification or takedown request, they're going to say, no, I like this phishing website and it's staying up. That's kind of the concept behind bulletproof hosting, meaning your hosting provider is going to have your back and not take your website offline unless you violate the terms of service, which is usually very, very limited in terms of what they don't allow. So that's certainly an option depending on what you're trying to host and what your needs are. You can definitely look into something like that. Okay, I'm going to back up here. I'm down to about 9 minutes or so, and I've highlighted PM Scientist question. What pros and cons exist for using a site you manage as reverse proxy to man in the middle or machine in the middle a simulated site versus copying the right bits of the simulated site? I was hoping I'd have a better answer for this by now. I don't know if I fully understand that question. What's good about using a site I manage as reverse proxy to man in the middle a simulated site? Yeah, I still don't really understand that, I don't think. And I apologize for that. Other thing Doug Brush mentioned, if you can only pay for your hosting provider with Bitcoin, yeah, that was the other thing. I wasn't about. It's like I was trying to pay with what was it? That one that eBay came up with, PayPal. I was like, I'll pay with PayPal. They're like, no, we don't accept PayPal. It's Bitcoin only. I was like, well, I guess that makes sense. How about a credit card? No, we don't take credit cards. It's Bitcoin only. And it totally, if you're a bulletproof hosting provider, I get it. And I was kind of being foolish there, but it is what it is. Technic, he's talking about capturing credentials in flight. Okay. Is there any benefit to doing it that way? In the premise of this conversation, that doesn't come up so much. Like, if I'm understanding it correctly. So PM scientist, thinking that a reverse proxy doesn't need to copy images, CSS, and communicate refer headers as needed. I got what you're saying. I think I got what you're saying. Yeah, without a doubt, that could prove to be useful for you. The thing, you could do an iframe too, quite frankly. Something like that could work as well. But you're still going to see some calls to that, to legitimate company, one way or another. Some amount of benefit. I'm sure there's some downsides. Yeah, there potentially could be. It just depends what you're trying to accomplish, and what your kind of risk tolerance is there with that. All right. What else? Questions. That's it. I don't tweet very much. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I work at that company over there, and I'm keeping an eye on this Discord channel for the moment. I know I got 7 minutes left, but I want to make sure I have enough time for the next presenter to come on and set up so they don't make the mistake that I made by being an idiot. Hopefully you all got a lot out of this talk. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please do reach out. Please feel free to LinkedIn or hit me up. You have 1, 2, 3 different points of contact for me at this moment in time. So don't be shy, don't hesitate, and I hope to see you all in the community and at future conferences. Thank you so much, and thank you, B-Sides, for doing this. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking today.
One thing that I think that we can all agree on is that if he sends a link in an email, we are not clicking it.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's fair. Certainly fair.
Now I have a feeling that the last 4 times I clicked on Dropbox, it probably wasn't even Dropbox, and he's got all the files I uploaded, but
I don't want your guys' stuff unless you're paying me. Unless someone's paying me for it and it's legitimate. Not so much nowadays. Good talk, sir.
Enjoy all the pictures of squirrels,
Yeah, there's no shortage of that. Thank you, Lucky225. Thank you, Poop Squad 420. Thank you, Mr. Doug Brush. Thank you, Rackfire45. Thanks for the question, PM Sciences. And yes, you're all very welcome. Glad I could be here today.